Welcome back to The Perspective, Ambassador. So we spoke earlier about how Jokowi has done or is on the right track in trying to improve ease of doing business in Indonesia, the investment climate in Indonesia, and its move and shift towards digital economy. He's very aware of how far Indonesia is left behind. Another issue that Jokowi is, one of his promises during his campaign is to uphold human rights in Indonesia. And though some experts deem it as he's still slow in his policy towards addressing human rights issues, but he's going to that direction. What are your views on it? You were in Papua twice in your time in Indonesia, and of course Papua is one of those areas that Jokowi is focusing on, freedom of speech, freedom of information as well. What are your views on how the government has tackled this issue?
So I think it's no secret that the government's primary focus has been on the economic agenda, right? We've talked about building competitiveness, ease of doing business, regulation, infrastructure, beginning negotiations with Europe on a SEPA, etc. These are the things that have occupied the president's time. I don't think there's any secret about that. But the human rights and the politics, of course, need attention too, right? You know, we all have difficult pasts, my country included.
Of course.
There are things in our past that, you know, are troublesome, are difficult, and ultimately you have to find ways of dealing with your past so that you can free your future. And there are things in Indonesia's past, whether it's the events of '65 or the events of '98, or indeed happenings in Aceh or Papua that actually need debate, need openness and transparency. I think, you know, in talking to the president and his team, they understand this, their instincts are right. But equally, you know, there's a lot of resistance in the system, and it takes time and effort to deal with this. I think the president's, you know, so I think the recent fora that have been organized on '65 are very welcome. I think the intention to have some investigations is absolutely right. I think the president's policy on Papua is on the money. You know, he's signaled that he understands that this is a big priority issue for Indonesia's future as a country. His commitment to visit 3 or 4 times a year means that there's an opportunity for people to engage. You know, a lot of the discussion on Papua tends to be around the economics of the issue and development and so on. But actually, if you look at what the president has said and done, I think he understands that there's a political dimension to this too, right? So, you know, the move to open access to journalists, to foreign journalists included, I think that's a political move. It's the president saying actually transparency is good. The move to release political prisoners, again, is a signal that this, you know, is an understanding that this is a rounded issue. Look, I should also say, because there's always this kind of suspicion around, you know, from the UK perspective, we on Papua, we're completely committed to the territorial integrity of Indonesia. Having been there a couple of times, you know, I don't believe there's any other alternative viable option. Papua is part of Indonesia. But Papuans alongside, you know, Acehnese or people from Kalimantan or from every other part of the country absolutely have a right to see their human rights, their social demands, their economic aspirations fulfilled. As Indonesian citizens. So our discussion with the government, our support through some British business engagement and some development activities all around.
There are a number of programs that the UK is helping
we're focused very much on climate change and protecting Papua's natural resources, which is both a climate change and an environment issue, but actually these are also political and economic issues too. So I think the president, you know, on Papua is very definitely along the right lines, and you know, we're keen to see that succeed. I think another human rights issue that's a really interesting and difficult one is the death penalty. You know, Indonesia is now one of a very small number of countries that continues to use the death penalty. 160 countries in the world have either abolished or decided that they don't want to use the death penalty.
And we are preparing for another round of
well, let's see. Let's see. But Indonesia is now in a small group of countries, along with countries like China, Iran, Iraq, in still using the death penalty. You know, my own view is, you know, these are decisions that countries have to make for themselves. But there's a need for a debate here in Indonesia. In my country, the last execution took place in 1964. We abolished in 1998. Okay, and as recently as 2011, if you took a poll of the people, you would have found a majority saying we want the death penalty
back.
It's back, and it's only in the last 2 years actually that we are now finding polling telling us that the majority of people have said, okay, this is our past. But this is one of those issues where politicians have to lead, not follow the street. Okay, that's what happened in my country. That's what I've seen happen all over the world. Politicians have to lead, not follow the street. And it's an issue on which we need to put emotion to one side and put aside that human desire for retribution and actually focus on evidence. And the evidence here is very mixed, right? The evidence shows that there is no, it's not mixed. There is no evidence to show that the death penalty has a deterrence impact. Okay, so you look at the US, which has used the death penalty for homicide for a long time. Actually, there is no deterrence impact. When you look at academic work by various distinguished academic bodies in the US, criminologists and so on, you find there's no evidence. Across the border in Canada, they abolished the death penalty in I think around 1998. And since then, without the death penalty, their homicide rate has fallen by 44%. You look on drugs policy, right? Iran has some of the world's strictest rules on drugs. They execute people all the time, okay? But drug use is super high. Sweden, no death penalty. Actually, drug prevalence is very low. In Indonesia, we've executed, I think, 66 people. Since 1979, mainly for drugs-related crimes. Has drug use gone up or down?
And it hasn't stopped. And in the past 2 or 3 weeks, you busted more. We had more drugs cases.
Okay, so I think we need to have a debate in Indonesia about whether this works. But we also need to have a debate about whether this is humane. Right. So there's a big risk of miscarriage of justice. Okay. In my country, we have miscarriages of justice. Recent cases this year. Okay. And in the U.S. Since 1973, 150 people who were executed were post-event exonerated.
Wow. Right?
150 people lost their lives and then subsequently were found to have been innocent, or their convictions were not watertight. So if in countries like the UK and the US you have miscarriages of justice, no one's going to persuade me that Indonesian systems are so tight. So you're going to execute innocent people here.
Right. There is that potential for you to do that.
So last week there was a very notable event where, for the first time, a number of prominent people came out and published a book and launched and spoke publicly about the death penalty.
Politik Hukum Mati in Indonesia.
Indeed.
Which was launched last week.
This book right here by my colleague Todang Mulia Lubis, right? A very, very prominent human rights lawyer, a very prominent corporate lawyer, actually. But there are other people who are speaking out on this too. Pak Ahok spoke out on this last year. Romo Magnus from the religious world spoke out about this. Todang Mulia, I've just told. Anggoran, the celebrity singer, has come out. And then Pa Habibie last week, former president. He came out very, very strongly and he said, look, he believes that the right to take life belongs only with God. It is God's right.
Not in the hands of humans.
Not in the hands of humans. And he said, given that this is a God's right, we should not, as human beings, usurp or take that right. And actually, those are the values as a young Muslim person that I was brought up with as I grew up in London.
And so Indonesia should decide. Jokowi should decide.
I think Indonesia should have a debate. I think Indonesia should have a debate. It doesn't need, actually, you asked, I've commented, it doesn't need foreign voices. Indonesia needs to have a debate about whether this is how Indonesia wants to be seen. Does it want to join the 160 countries that have put this aside because of issues around evidence, deterrence, risks of miscarriage of justice? Or does it want to align itself with that small group that continue? I think this is a debate that's much needed.
a debate, and subsequently Indonesia, Jokowi needs to decide. Ambassador Malik, thank you so much for spending time here, and hopefully you will have an enjoyable Ramadan in the next few weeks, and also Idul Fitri here in Indonesia.
Thank you very much, and thanks to you and your viewers, and I wish them a happy Ramadan and indeed a very happy Idul Fitri, a happy Lebaran.
All right, thank you. This has been Perspective with me, Florence Armain, and our guest today, the British Ambassador to Indonesia, His Excellency Ambassador Moazzam Malik. Thank you very much for watching.